Good afternoon, Girl Scout Network. I'm Ava Castleton, Manager of Alum Events at Girl Scouts of the USA, and I'm so excited to present to you Girl Scout Network's Campfire Chat, Creating Flexibility at Work, with Girl Scout alum and author of the 5th trimester, Lauren Smith Brody. We're looking forward to getting started with this event for alums and adult supporters shortly. Before we get started, we wanted to acknowledge that the last few months have been challenging for our country, from the COVID-19 pandemic to weeks of civil unrest. At our core, Girl Scouts aims to inspire girls to be leaders in their own lives by building the courage, confidence, and character to raise their voices and be advocates for the issues and ideas that are important to them as individuals. Fundamentally, Girl Scouts promotes equality and justice. We're dedicated to actively working to change unjust systems that contribute to racial injustice and gender inequity. In the chat log, we will be sharing resources and links that can help encourage the girls in your life to be the catalysts for change in their communities and the world. Now I'd like to introduce our expert today, Lauren Smith Brody, who will talk with us and walk us through how to begin to rethink flexibility in your work life. We first started discussing this topic with Lauren months ago, but because of the ways that the pandemic has changed the way we work, it feels more relevant than ever today. I'll be sharing your questions with Lauren, so don't be afraid to type them in the question box. Don't forget to tag social posts with hashtag Campfire Chats and @GirlScouts. We can't wait to hear how you're using Lauren's techniques in your own lives. At the end of our broadcast, you'll also have the opportunity to support Girl Scouts. Lauren, it's so great to have you back.
And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you guys for joining and for giving me an excuse to put on mascara for the first time in a while. I'm really delighted to be here. And I will start this webinar with the same thing that I say at the beginning of most of my Zoom calls, which I'm imagining a lot of you do too, which is that there will undoubtedly be interruptions from my dog, my kids, from the lawnmower outside, who knows. I appreciate your patience and kindness, and I would offer it right back to you if I could see into your homes too. So first of all, let me introduce myself. So my name is Lauren Brody. I was for years an editor at Glamour magazine. I had both of my sons there. I realized going back to work that there really was not the support that there had been. There was a lot of support for pregnancy, new baby, career, but then there was nothing for me after pregnancy, after going back to work to support me in an environment in which, a good maternity leave in the United States is 12 weeks unpaid. Mine was fortunately a little bit paid, a little bit unpaid. It all worked out okay. But going back, I realized that all parents need more support going back to work. So I started, kid jumping by. I started doing a lot of research, looking nationally in the United States at what the return to work looks like, and was able to put all of that together into a book that I published a couple years later called The 5th Trimester. I have since turned this into a business, and the reason why it makes sense for me to be here for you guys today, whether or not you have children, maybe motherhood is in the rearview mirror for you, little kids at least, maybe it's ahead, maybe you're not having kids at all, and that's totally fine. The reason that I have something to offer you is that because as I have coached and counseled and gone into businesses and helped them make a more welcoming environment for parents and helped them see the value of retaining women for the long term by supporting them through this transition back to work, what I've seen is that very often the most visible workplace need, you can't see my hands on the screen, here they are. I usually go like this when I give a talk live. The most visible workplace need that we often see in the workplace is this big pregnant belly, right? And so that is often the starting point for a lot of organizations and businesses to figure out, how do we adapt? I don't like the word accommodate. How do we adapt to help people support their personal lives in a way that makes them feel more dedicated and more vital and more valued and more satisfied in their work lives? So anyway, so I'm here to talk to you today about flexibility. So I just want to get right into it. I've got a lot of good stats and research to share that I hope will ultimately, it's okay, you can go down the stairs. That's my little boy. He's going for his first bike ride alone. There are some silver linings of this whole situation. One of which is that school ended a couple days early for him. Anyway, so flexibility, which is what we're here to talk about. So I think that a lot of us had, prior to the pandemic, a lot of us had sort of an old-fashioned notion of what flexibility was. Flexibility might have been, somebody asks to go part-time and they, want to spend more time at home or perhaps work from home a little more, get paid less to do it. What we've seen, and really what we've seen for the last 20 years with, the availability, the constant availability of being on your phone and being on email and available to people you work with, is that those old-fashioned boundaries of 9 to 5, or as have been in my case, more like, like 8 to 6, 8 to 8, everything sort of mushes together anyway. So we have for the last many years been accommodating work in our personal lives. And what this pandemic has really forced us to do is to do the opposite, to accommodate, our personal lives in the way we approach our work. And in fact, actually, it's given us a glimpse into our colleagues' personal lives in a way that has shown us at a moment when we really do feel like if you're worried about illness, if you're worried about taking care of your family, of course, that's a very, very natural impulse and instinct, but also you're seeing your colleagues' personal lives too in a way that makes them so real, in a way that we may have not had visible to us previously before. So anyway, so a lot of us are finding ourselves embracing some of the flexibility of now. I mean, yes, it is total chaos too at many moments of the day, but there are pieces of this that we might want to keep. And so when you think about flexibility going forward, it's not that old notion of like, oh, I'm going to go part-time and get paid less for it. It could be total time you spend on your work. Perhaps it's that you're spending fewer hours but delivering the same job. It could be working on a really different schedule. A lot of us have, especially any of us who have a partner who is home. My partner is actually an essential worker, so he's not been home with me taking care of my kids. Our kids, they are our kids. But a lot of people who I've coached who have partners who also work have decided to work in bursts. So maybe like mom works for 3 hours straight while dad watches kid, or partner watches kid, and then you switch. So often that means you're doing work late into the night. So that's schedule flexibility. Location flexibility, of course. I can't tell you how many organizations I work with who have said to me, we're not really sure we can offer flexibility. And then boom, mid-March, suddenly guess what? Everybody was working, not everybody was working, essential workers were not working from home, but everybody who could conceivably work from home was working from home. And I think a lot of people realized, hey, actually, we can make this work if we have to, and we had to. Fluidity of duties. Flexibility can also include whether or not you're going to do your job exactly the way that you were hired to do it. Very, very often we evolve and we grow into the duties that we're doing. If you look at like, what your actual job description was when you started this job, it's probably evolved. And so perhaps some of the flexibility that you desire is actually changing some of those duties or changing your salary to better accommodate the duties that you're actually doing. And then the last kind of flexibility that I'll mention to you is just cultural integration of personal into professional. This is not just having a picture of, a child, a pet, your mom, your brother, whatever, in your workspace. This is being able to talk about it. This is, for my clients at least, who are pumping breast milk, this isn't like, I gotta leave the meeting. This is, hey all, I'm leaving to go pump breast milk. I'll be back in, 25 minutes. During that time, here's the work I'm doing, and like, throw that stigma out the window. This is you're doing many jobs at once when you do something like that, and being really open about it is a form of flexibility that our workplaces are really starting to embrace. So I'll ask you, try this, and I'm sorry, I'm like an old copy editor from magazine days. I can't help myself with calling it this, but try this flexercise. So flexercise. Ask yourself, what do I want to keep from this time? Because I think that is usually a good guide to figuring out what kind of flexibility you most might like to keep and negotiate for. And then toward the end of this, I'm going to teach you how to negotiate. And I know Ava said it, but it bears repeating. If you have questions, please type them into the chat box. I am an open book. I will answer anything. And we'll get to them at the end. Okay, so flexercise. Ask yourself, what do I want to keep? So here are a few things that I've heard in my coaching and in the corporate work that I've been doing lately. People want to keep, here's a big one, no commute. How much time does your commute take up? So in the surveying that I did nationally for my book, which by the way was inclusive of single moms, adoptive moms, moms who worked hourly wage jobs, moms who were C-level at Fortune 500 companies, really, really encompassed as much diversity as I could find with approaches to both how they define motherhood and how they define career. So the statistic that when I asked my questions about commute was that people said that their commutes were 50% more stressful after having kids. Well, we've eliminated that stress, not just for parents, but for everyone right now of not commuting. We've certainly added many other stresses, but if you're enjoying not having to commute, what can you do to perhaps keep that? Can you continue to work from home? If not, 5 days a week, maybe it's going to be, 3 days a week or 2 days a week. And that may actually be the reality that we're dealt when we look at opening back up and whether people are staggered and whether there's sort of a, social distancing in the workplace that forces us to work on a staggered schedule. So there may be less commuting. So you may want to negotiate for even less than that commuting. What else do we want to keep from this time? Something I love to talk about is the makeup tax. If that's a term you haven't heard before, that is the time and money that women spend looking Zoom ready, but really looking appropriate, whatever sort of the cultural norm around how they should look for their job is looking that way. Far be it from me to tell you what you should look like for your job, but you should ask yourself, like, do I really want to spend all this money, all this energy, all this time? And if you've been doing less of that because you have more control over how visible you are and what times of day, perhaps there's some of that you could keep. And also like reinvest that time in actual self-care, perhaps, not just necessarily curling your eyelashes. Not that there's anything wrong with curling your eyelashes. I worked at Glamour magazine for years. I actually have read all the research on why sort of thinking you look good helps you project that to the world and helps you receive it back too. It is real. What else do you want to keep? Do you want to keep seeing more of your family? Big one. Do you want to keep being in your home more? Oh, there's my doggy, speaking of home. Do you want to keep cooking more for yourself? I don't know about you, but I cooked basically 3 meals a day for 3 months straight. I think we've ordered in pizza twice. We live in New York City normally. Right now we're up in Connecticut at a home that we rented for the month. What else do you want to keep? Do you want to keep meetings that have actual defined time limits and agendas? That's a big one. I mean, how many times have you been in an endless meeting with people who just totally go completely off of whatever was meant to be on the agenda? Well, on Zoom, like there's probably a time limit. You pull people together and pull them away from their lives to be there. And there seems to be more of a respect for that defined meeting time and what we're actually accomplishing during that meeting. But we wouldn't keep that too. It's another thing about Zoom. So one thing I've noted is this idea of Zoom equality. I don't know if anybody else has noted that term. That's just kind of what I've coined it. Somebody else probably has a better term for it. But it's the idea that, guess what? All of our rectangles are the same size. If you are in the meeting, that old, Sheryl Sandberg notion of like pull your chair up to the table, we're all at the table. We all count equally. That's worth keeping too. Something else worth keeping, of course, and I think I started with this, is just the personal connection and vulnerability that we now have with coworkers that we may not have had before. Everyone's lives are precious. We know that, and we respect that about each other in a way that we haven't before, perhaps. I like to think I tried to before, but I think we're probably more sensitive to it now. Also, how about the appreciation for formerly invisible essential workers? I mean, we until a week ago, we were in New York opening our window at 7 o'clock every night, cheering and cheering and cheering. And, it was for the doctors. There's 2 hospitals that are close to us, and the healthcare aides and the nurses. But it was also for the FedEx guys on the street. It was for the Fresh Direct as a grocery delivery service we have in New York. And every night there would be, a Fresh Direct delivery person wheeling, and they would look up and we were cheering for them in a way that we have never noticed and appreciated them before. And I think that's valuable. Let's keep that. There's also a real visibility of invisible labor, if that's a term you haven't heard before. That is like all the work that goes into childcare, home care, that perhaps your partner may not be aware of or see. Well, all that invisible labor, guess what? It is now painfully visible when we are all in the same space and have been for so long together. So what can we do to really understand what is like the dollar value of a load of laundry, and to keep the visibility of the way that couples in particular contribute to their families? And then the last thing I want to mention of what we might want to keep is just this deliberately scheduled time with friends. For any of you who've had, a Zoom cocktail, or, really tried to reach out to perhaps, an elderly family member or someone in a way that's like much more planned and deliberate, we've lost a lot of spontaneity, and that is a loss. But there is something really valuable about the fact that we now are building that time into our schedules in a way that I think we can all acknowledge is pretty emotionally important. So then what I want to do is I want to teach you how to, once you've identified the things you'd like to keep, I want to teach you how to negotiate for them. And the best thing you can do is the very first step for negotiating is to internalize the value of these things, of this flexibility that you're going to be asking for. So I'm just going to like rattle off a bunch of statistics. I think a bunch of them are on the takeaway one sheet that Girl Scouts created for this. They should be there, but I'm also happy to answer specific questions about them in the question portion, but I want to just zip right through them. So in October of 2019, so less than a year ago, in the before time, 44% of companies offered no flexibility at all. That's from a research organization called Owl Labs. On March 13th, 31% of American workers were working remotely. And of course, that doesn't even include people who can't work remotely, who are essential workers who continue to go into their workplaces. So even still, nearly a third of American workers were working remotely after we knew that almost half the companies didn't offer it previously. By March 30th, that number had doubled to 62%, according to a Gallup poll. 62% of workers were working remotely. This is seeming infinitely more possible than it ever was before. The other thing to note about the case for flexibility. So first of all, it's possible. Those statistics prove it's possible. Next, it's motivating. This research has existed long before COVID times. So 97% of workers want flexible options. Something else I talk about in my research all the time is that we know that millennial workers in particular value flexibility and work-life balance actually above their pay, which is not always good news, because you should actually get both. You shouldn't undercut yourself financially to have that flexibility necessarily. But it's interesting to note that for recruiters, for anybody out there who works in hiring people, that this is incredibly valued, and it really improves the reputation of the place you're recruiting to. Flexibility is also productive. So there's been a ton of studies about this. Probably the most conservative one is from Stanford, and it showed that flexible work from home actually increases people's productivity by 13%. It's also healthy. 86% of workers believe that flex reduces their stress. That's from an organization called Flex Jobs, which has a million great statistics to arm your case if you need it. Flexibility breeds loyalty. Remote work actually reduces attrition. That's the fancy word that means you're leaving your job. So it reduces attrition by 25%. And it's not all or nothing that a lot of people think like, oh, I'm flex or I'm not. No, the whole point of it is like you take the pieces, of that soup, salad bowl, whatever you want to call it, and put them together in a way that works for you. So the highest engagement and focus actually comes from a partly remote schedule, which is an interesting thing to think about now as we sort of decide what we want next. So then this last couple of minutes before we go to questions, I'm just going to give you the cheater's guide to getting what you want from a negotiation. It's really important also, so you've got all of that sort of internalized data to think about, to know that actually flexibility is valuable. It's really important when you go into these conversations not to stigmatize yourself, because you need to prevent stigma as you negotiate for these things, because flexibility can become a gender equity issue. If it's only women who are asking for it, it can ultimately be detrimental. So we need to approach it as not just as women, but as human beings, and we need to encourage our male coworkers to also do the same. So here's how you jump right in. You want to, I have like 3 screens going right now, it's kind of crazy. First of all, do your research. We talked about that internal research you've got. You should also look externally at your sector. So who else in what other statistics can you find about the flexibility that is offered at like your 3 biggest competitors? You know, so that could be like in your region, that could be in your sector of, you know, like the kind of business that you do that. You also really want to know your internal policies. A lot of places, there have been studies about this, have policies for flex that exist that people just aren't aware of because they're not really like, you know, written on a big banner and put up like, you know, in the break room, which by the way, nobody's going to a break room now anyway. Next step, so do that research, come with that like in your back pocket, in your front pocket too, like just have it in your hands. Next, come with a plan or potential plans, maybe even A, B, and C plan that would make you satisfied. Don't come with an ask. This isn't like you're begging for this, you're asking for this. It may feel incredibly vital and crucial to you because it is helping make your personal life work. But actually, as you'll see in a second from what I talk about next, this is something that's beneficial to everybody. So come in with a plan that is solid, that shows how you're going to meet your job requirement, your job description, which you should know going in what that is, and meet it in these new terms. Then third, you want to manage up, which is this term about like who's above you and how are you going to make them feel okay about this, because they are also a human being at work and they probably also have a boss who they might also need to get approval for your plan. So give them everything they need. Anticipate what concerns they might have, what, you know, worries they might have about how this could ripple out to other people you're working with, and come with that baked into your plan. Step 4, offer yourself up as a guinea pig to the organization. This is actually a way that you are not less than because you're asking for this thing and you're coming with this plan. You are more than. You are proving to them that this flexibility, which we now, for all those statistics that I just quoted, you know is so vital to the workplace now, you're going to demonstrate it, and you're going to demonstrate it in the most productive, loyalty-inducing way. And you're also, you know, this is going to start with your need, whatever that is, whether that is a pregnant belly, whether that is, you know, an essential worker spouse, whether that is, you know, a kid with developmental needs who's older, who needs more of you. Maybe that's just your own mental health. Maybe it's just something you need to do for you. That all counts too. Anyway, you're going to offer yourself up as the guinea pig who's going to show that actually by accommodating this one thing for you, it's going to ripple out and affect everybody for the positive. And then last step, you're going to suggest a trial period, because this isn't necessarily forever. You're going to be trying it too and seeing what works, and you may need to ask for slightly different things or different tweaks. And the reality is we should all be having these conversations about career growth, about flexibility, about the ways that we can feel loyal and good about our work and bring our best selves to work and bring our best work to work all the time anyway. It's a career development conversation. It just happens to be the first one of those for you might be a negotiation. And then you also want to continue to renegotiate and just check in with yourself, put notes on your calendar about, you know, how far out am I going to look at this? How, you know, do I want to try it for a month? Do I want to try it for 6 months? That can also be something that lets the person signing off on it be that much more comfortable with it. That's my basic guide. And now I would love to turn it over to questions from any of you.
Wonderful. And we have a ton of questions. People are so excited that you're here. So I'm happy to see that we have a manager who is asking how they can offer the greatest flexibility to their staff and maintain levels of fairness for all.
I would have it's a great question. I would have, and thank you for being here, and thank you for being a manager who is caring about this stuff and trying to make it work. I would have a ton of one-on-ones. I would try to do some surveying. I would try to see what people need. There's a lot that they might not bring up in a big meeting, but that they would be able to say one-on-one. And this might be a little out there depending on what your organization is, but I was just consulting with a law firm the other day, and they've got, you know, a bunch of lawyers who have really, really varying care needs. It's mostly the moms who I'm working with there. And, you know, there are single mothers. There are mothers who have, you know, someone with a health condition where they can't come back to work yet. There's just a lot going on. And my best advice actually is to do a stipend, is just to say, like, I'm not judging whether or not you need this kind of care or that kind of care. I am giving you a flat, in their case, because of the sort of salary level of these employees and where they were living, I suggested $3,000 a month flat for as long as this goes on to offset any kind of caregiving costs. And I like calling it caregiving, not childcare, because that could be caregiving for yourself, that could be caregiving for an elder, for any person in your life. not everybody's going to take you up on it necessarily, but I think, the offer is really meaningful, and the offset of that financial burden that a lot of people have been feeling, and I've heard a lot of stories of things that have cost people a lot of money in care and in the work they're able to do, will ultimately pay off really fast. I could talk for another 30 minutes about the value of keeping and retaining women so that they grow into leadership, because there's all this research that shows, like, dollar for dollar how valuable we are.
Thank you. So how do you respond when an employer says, since you don't have a commute, we need you to turn that report in earlier because you lose that newly gained time?
Oh, interesting. I'm not sure what kind of business that is necessarily, but generally, I find that particularly for dealing with managers who might feel just a little out of control, not having eyes on their staff all the time, or making kind of minute by minute demands, that you can preempt that somewhat by being really predictable about when your deliverables are coming. So a lot of people find, especially if they're trying to care for kids at the same time, as working from home, which is, by the way, not ideal. Like, eventually, even if we're working from home, you should try to have childcare. But so they find that they are, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Hang on. This is the question. Repeat the question again.
This is about
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry.
commuting.
Okay, so you want to see? So this is me, guys. Like, this is me with my kid downstairs on Minecraft, my dog on the couch that she should not be on. I just called him a he. Anyway, like, this kind of vulnerability, I really encourage you, because I don't think anybody who's watching disliked me for that. Like, actually, just be yourself, and people will be pretty wonderful about it. So anyway, you want to be predictable. You're probably able most of your day. And this is assuming you have, like, an emailing Slack kind of job, which I realize a good many of you do not have those kinds of jobs. But for those who do, you're probably able to receive, to like read, receive all day long, digest. But you may not be able to, like, sit and type or respond or think through the problem to be able to, like, figure out, like, okay, what's the next step? So you want to be predictable about those think through times when you are actually, like, producing something, whether it's thought, whether it's like a document, a report, whatever it is, and just regularly just express to everybody, like, so my producing time, I'm working all day long, but my producing time is going to be, I will be in touch around 10 a.m. I'll be in touch around 2 p.m., whatever the equivalent is for you, so that it also takes that worry away from you. You're not worried that somebody's, like, thinking and disappointed and not getting this thing. And so you tell them when it's going to be there, and I guarantee you they're not going to beat down your door for it anymore. And for somebody who needs something done first thing in the morning, I really believe a lot in a scheduled reply. So if it means that you're actually doing it in the evening time and you have it done, but you don't press send because you don't necessarily want them to think that you are available to be doing work at 11 p.m., but have it ready to go. And when you get up in the morning, press send, and that boss is going to be happy.
That's a great tip. So when you're making this request for a newly agreed upon schedule for remote work, should you get this in writing with your manager or HR to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's good to keep a record. It just always is. I don't think you necessarily need to have, an agreement like a contract. It really depends on the kind of work that you're doing. Perhaps if you are a contracted worker, somebody who is working, on contract anyway, or somebody who is working an hourly wage job, yes, you might need that in, like, kind of formal, like, legal writing. Otherwise, an email should be enough. Even if it's just like you have the meeting and you had a good conversation that kind of seemed like it was going to work, just go sit back down and just reply to the person you met with and say, thank you so much for taking this time, just putting down, into words what we talked about, A, B, and C, so that when we pick up the conversation next, we know where we left off. And there it is. It's in writing. This is not, like, asking them to sign on the dotted line, but it does make an account of the conversation that you had.
Thank you so much, Lauren. We have so many more questions, so I'm just going to let everybody know that in the handouts, there's Lauren's social handles at the bottom of it. So if you have more of those questions, you can ask her directly. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone for inviting the Girl Scout Network into your homes. We'll be hosting a wide variety of campfire chats, so be sure to stay up to date with our offerings at girlscouts.org/campfirechats. In the meantime, you can support Girl Scouts by becoming an adult member. which allows you to donate $25 to help fund our work building the next generation of female leaders. Your generosity will also help support the 1.7 million Girl Scouts depending on our programming. The link has been posted in the chat log and will also be included in the follow-up email to today's event. As mentioned earlier, we've also shared links to resources that can help encourage girls to be the change makers today and tomorrow's leaders, as well as a link to articles on how to help girls take action against racism. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back at our next event.